Some people steal money. Others steal authority. But nothing destroys a lie faster than the moment it collides with the truth. The afternoon sun hung low above downtown Atlanta, casting long golden reflections across the glass towers that lined Peachtree Street. Office workers hurried toward cafes. Tourists paused beneath traffic lights with shopping bags in hand, and the steady rhythm of city life echoed through every passing car, every distant siren, every hurried conversation drifting through the warm summer air. It looked like another ordinary weekday, predictable, routine, almost forgettable. No one standing on that crowded sidewalk realized they were only seconds away from witnessing a confrontation that thousands would later replay online, debating every frame, every word, every decision. Marcus Bennett walked calmly along the sidewalk with measured steps. He wore no police uniform, just a charcoal gray jacket over a navy button-up shirt, dark jeans, and polished leather shoes. His posture was relaxed, his expression unreadable, his eyes quietly scanning the movement around him with the awareness of someone who had spent years observing details others ignored. To everyone passing by, Marcus looked like another professional leaving work early. Nothing more, nothing less. An elderly couple smiled as they passed him. A little boy chased a pigeon across the plaza. Street musicians played a slow jazz melody that floated between the buildings, soft enough to disappear beneath the noise of traffic. For one brief moment, the city felt peaceful. Then everything changed. A black SUV screeched to a stop beside the curb. Its tires screamed against the pavement. Several pedestrians instinctively stepped backward. The passenger door burst open. A tall white man climbed out wearing what appeared to be a police uniform. Dark blue shirt, duty belt, radio, handcuffs, even a shining badge resting confidently above his chest. He moved with absolute certainty, the kind of confidence people instinctively obeyed. Without introducing himself, without explaining why, he pointed directly at Marcus. You. His voice cut through the busy intersection like a knife. Don't move. Every nearby conversation stopped. Heads turned. Phones slowly emerged from pockets. Marcus paused. He neither ran nor argued. Instead, he looked quietly toward the stranger. The man's boots struck the concrete with heavy, deliberate steps until only a few feet separated them. I said don't move, he barked again. You matched the description. A ripple of uneasy whispers spread across the growing crowd. Someone muttered that the man must be a detective. Another assumed Marcus had committed a crime. A young woman instinctively began recording with her phone. Marcus remained perfectly still. His breathing never changed. His shoulders never tensed. Even his voice, when he finally spoke, carried no anger. No problem, he answered calmly. May I know which department you're with? The question seemed simple, professional, reasonable. Yet something strange flickered across the other man's face. Only for an instant. Then it disappeared beneath another layer of arrogance. You don't ask questions. I ask the questions. He stepped even closer, invading Marcus's personal space before grabbing his wrist with unnecessary force. You people always think you're above the law. Several people exchanged uncomfortable glances. Nobody intervened. Nobody knew enough to intervene. Because from where they stood, everything looked official. The badge looked real. The uniform looked authentic. The confidence looked convincing. And authority, whether genuine or counterfeit, often frightened witnesses into silence. Marcus slowly lowered his eyes toward the man's hand gripping his wrist. His gaze lingered for less than a second. Not on the fingers, not on the handcuffs, but on the badge, then the shoulder patch, then the radio clipped awkwardly to the vest. Tiny details, almost invisible, yet his expression changed ever so slightly. Not with fear, not with panic, recognition, like a man quietly solving a puzzle whose answer had finally appeared. The stranger mistook Marcus's silence for submission. A smug smile crept across his face. Lucky for you, he sneered loudly enough for everyone to hear. I'm making this easy. He reached toward the handcuffs hanging from his belt. Metal clicked. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Camera lenses tilted upward together. No one noticed Marcus glance briefly toward the traffic camera mounted high above the intersection. No one noticed his thumb gently press against the side of the watch resting beneath his sleeve. No one noticed the almost invisible green light that blinked once and disappeared. The fake officer smiled wider, believing complete control now rested in his hands. He had no idea. The moment he reached for those handcuffs was the exact moment his own countdown quietly began. The fake officer tightened his grip as though the pressure of his hand alone could establish authority. Marcus Bennett didn't resist. He didn't pull away. He didn't even raise his voice. Instead, he looked directly into the man's eyes with a calmness so unnatural that it unsettled several people watching from the sidewalk. Around them, downtown Atlanta had come to a complete standstill. Cars slowed. Pedestrians stopped in the middle of crosswalks. A food vendor abandoned his cart. Every phone camera seemed pointed toward the same scene. People always believed they knew what they were seeing. A man wearing a badge. Another man being detained. The story practically wrote itself. No one questioned whether the badge itself deserved questioning. Hands behind your back, the fake officer ordered. His tone carried practiced confidence. The kind learned from watching real officers for years. Marcus slowly complied, never taking his eyes off him. "May I ask your name, officer?" Marcus said quietly. "You don't need my name. You just need to cooperate." Several spectators nodded in agreement. He should just listen. If he didn't do anything, he'll be fine. The familiar assumptions spread through the crowd like invisible smoke. Marcus heard every word. He had heard similar words before. Years earlier. Different streets. Different faces. The same dangerous certainty. The fake officer reached for the handcuffs hanging from his belt. Metal scraped against leather. His movements looked convincing enough to fool almost everyone. Almost. Marcus noticed the cheap finish beneath the polished coating. The serial number was missing. The restraint chain was slightly shorter than regulation issue. Tiny flaws. Invisible to ordinary citizens. Impossible for a trained officer to overlook. "So," Marcus asked evenly, "which precinct assigned you here today?" The man's jaw tightened. "I said stop asking questions." He shoved Marcus forward. Not violently. Just enough to establish dominance before the cameras surrounding them. Gasps echoed through the growing audience. Some people stepped backward. Others leaned closer, hungry for drama. No one realized they were witnessing something far more dangerous than a simple arrest. They were watching stolen authority in action. The fake officer glanced around with growing confidence. The crowd believed him. Fear was doing exactly what he expected. Keeping everyone silent. Keeping everyone obedient. He smiled. "You people always think you know your rights." Marcus remained expressionless. "I do know my rights. And I know yours." The sentence was delivered without anger. Without challenge. Without emotion. For the briefest second, uncertainty crossed the fake officer's face. Then arrogance buried it again. "You'll have plenty of time to talk downtown." He reached toward Marcus's wrists. The handcuffs clicked open. One bracelet closed around Marcus's left wrist. Another click. But before the second cuff could lock, a faint voice crackled through the fake officer's radio. Static. Then silence. He frowned. He adjusted the volume. Nothing. Because the radio wasn't connected to any police frequency. Marcus noticed. So did no one else. High above the intersection, traffic cameras continued recording every movement. Across the street, inside an unmarked black SUV parked behind tinted windows, two pairs of eyes watched the encounter unfold without moving. Neither officer inside reached for the door handle. Not yet. They had been waiting weeks for the suspect to expose himself completely. Every second mattered. Every word mattered. Every unlawful command strengthened the case. On the sidewalk, the fake officer pulled harder on Marcus's arm, believing the moment belonged entirely to him. Marcus simply looked at the blinking pedestrian signal. Across the street. 10 seconds. That was all he needed. The countdown had already begun. Only one man standing there didn't know it was counting down to his own arrest. The pedestrian signal changed from red to green. 9 seconds. Marcus Bennett never looked at the fake officer again. Instead, his attention drifted across the intersection, almost as if he were watching the ordinary flow of the city continue around them. A delivery truck rolled past. Cyclists waited impatiently behind stopped traffic. Somewhere nearby, the soft notes of a saxophone returned, filling the brief silence left between the growing whispers of the crowd. Life had not stopped. Only this moment had. "You think this is funny?" the fake officer snapped. Marcus answered with the same measured tone. "No, I think it's unfortunate." The reply irritated the man even more. He tightened the single cuff around Marcus's wrist until the metal dug into his skin. "You don't seem nervous." "I've been in more difficult situations." The fake officer laughed loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. Oh, really? You won't be saying that once you're in a holding cell. Several spectators nodded. One elderly man quietly shook his head but remained silent. A young college student continued live streaming, whispering into her phone. This guy's getting arrested downtown. Within minutes, thousands of strangers would be watching. Most of them would immediately choose a side. Very few would notice the details. Marcus did. Every movement, every word, every mistake. The fake officer never requested identification. He never announced probable cause. He never called dispatch. He never followed a single procedure that every certified officer learned before ever placing handcuffs on another human being. Confidence had become his greatest weakness, because confidence often made careless people believe they no longer needed precision. What are you looking at? The man demanded. Marcus glanced toward the badge one last time. It isn't centered. The fake officer frowned. What? Your badge. It's mounted almost half an inch too low. For the first time since stepping from the SUV, the man's hand instinctively brushed across his chest, only for a fraction of a second. Long enough, Marcus noticed. So did the tiny body camera hidden inside a pair of sunglasses worn by a woman standing near the bus stop. She wasn't a tourist. She wasn't recording for social media. She was part of the surveillance team. Inside the unmarked SUV across the street, Detective Laura Hayes lowered her binoculars. He took the bait, she said quietly. Her partner, Detective Ethan Brooks, kept his eyes fixed on Marcus. He always does. A laptop between them displayed live video feeds from traffic cameras surrounding the intersection. Every angle, every command, every unlawful action. Timestamped, recorded, preserved. Weeks of investigation had led to this single encounter. The suspect had impersonated police officers across 3 counties. Victims had reported intimidation, illegal searches, stolen cash, and assaults. But every complaint lacked one thing: proof. Until today, back on the sidewalk, the fake officer still believed he controlled the story. He pulled Marcus one step closer. I've dealt with people like you before. Marcus met his stare. No, you've dealt with people who were afraid. The words landed differently. Not louder, not sharper. Simply true. For the first time, the fake officer couldn't immediately respond. A strange silence settled between them. The confidence on his face cracked almost imperceptibly. Then, from somewhere just beyond the crowd, came the distant sound of multiple engines accelerating in perfect synchronization. Marcus heard them. So did Detective Hayes. The operation was entering its final phase. The fake officer smiled again, unaware that every second he delayed was no longer helping him intimidate his victim. It was helping investigators build an even stronger case against him. The first patrol siren became audible only as a faint echo between the buildings. Most people didn't even notice it. The fake officer certainly didn't. His attention remained fixed on Marcus Bennett, convinced the man standing before him was just another citizen who had learned the hard way not to challenge authority. He couldn't have been more wrong. Start walking, he ordered, pulling on the single handcuff. Marcus took one slow step, then another, never resisting, never arguing. His calmness no longer looked like fear. It looked deliberate. That difference began to spread through the crowd. Something feels off, a woman whispered. He isn't acting like someone who's panicking. A middle-aged businessman frowned. Why hasn't the officer called dispatch? No one answered. Questions were replacing assumptions. And once doubt entered a crowd, certainty disappeared quickly. The fake officer sensed the change. His voice became louder, more aggressive. Everybody back. This is official police business. Several people instinctively stepped away. Others didn't. Instead, they kept filming. Every second added another angle, another recording, another witness. The fake officer reached toward Marcus again, intending to secure the second cuff. Marcus quietly shifted his wrist just enough to prevent the bracelet from closing without appearing to resist. It looked accidental. It wasn't. The delay lasted only 3 seconds. 3 seconds that allowed another unlawful command, another unnecessary shove, another threat, to be captured forever. You think you're smart? The fake officer hissed. Marcus answered almost gently. I think every action leaves evidence. The words barely registered. The fake officer scoffed. Evidence? I'm wearing the badge. Marcus looked directly at him. A badge isn't evidence. Conduct is. For a heartbeat, neither man spoke. Wind pushed a discarded newspaper across the sidewalk. The distant jazz music had stopped. Even the city itself seemed to be waiting. Across the street, Detective Laura Hayes watched another timestamp appear across the surveillance monitor. Unlawful detention, she said quietly. Detective Ethan Brooks nodded. Add intimidation. A technician sitting behind them never looked away from the screen. 4 independent camera angles. Crystal clear. Inside the surveillance vehicle, nobody celebrated. Professional investigators knew cases weren't won by dramatic moments. They were won by patient documentation. Outside, the fake officer had become impatient. He grabbed Marcus by the shoulder. Harder this time. You've got one last chance to cooperate. Marcus remained steady. I have been cooperating. No. You've been pretending. The sentence struck deeper than Marcus intended. For the first time, the fake officer's confidence gave way to irritation. Real irritation. He stepped closer until only inches separated them. You have no idea who you're talking to. Marcus held his gaze. I know exactly who I'm talking to. You just don't know who you're talking to. The crowd fell silent. Something about the exchange felt different now. Not like an arrest. Like two people playing entirely different games. One believed he was winning because he controlled the moment. The other understood the outcome had already been decided long before the confrontation began. Then the sound became impossible to ignore. Not one engine. Several. Approaching from different directions with disciplined precision. The fake officer glanced over his shoulder for the first time. Only briefly. Only instinctively. Marcus noticed the movement. So did Detective Hayes. She reached for the radio clipped to her vest. All units, she said calmly. The suspect has fully committed. Move in. Across the intersection, unmarked vehicles began turning the corner. The trap was no longer being built. It was beginning to close. The approaching engines never accelerated recklessly. They moved with discipline, purpose, precision. To everyone gathered on the sidewalk, they sounded like ordinary traffic somewhere beyond the next block. Only those involved in the operation understood what those engines meant. Positions confirmed. Perimeter closing. No unnecessary risks. Marcus Bennett remained exactly where he was. One hand was still secured by the counterfeit handcuff. The other rested calmly at his side. His breathing stayed slow and even, almost unaffected by the tension surrounding him. The fake officer interpreted that composure as surrender. You finally figured out you're not getting out of this, he said with a smug grin. Marcus answered without hesitation. I figured something out. What? You've stopped thinking. The words lingered in the air. Not because they were loud. Because they were true. The fake officer's smile faded for an instant. What did you say? Marcus didn't repeat himself. Instead, his eyes drifted briefly toward the shoulder patch sewn onto the uniform. The stitching was uneven. The department seal was printed in the wrong shade of blue. The nameplate sat a fraction too high. Tiny flaws. Invisible to nearly everyone else. Obvious to someone who had spent years wearing the real uniform. Across the street, Detective Laura Hayes watched another notification appear across her monitor. Every nearby traffic camera had synchronized. Every civilian recording already uploaded to the cloud was being preserved through emergency evidence requests. Nothing happening on this sidewalk would disappear. Not today. Back in the crowd, uncertainty continued spreading. A teenage boy lowered his phone. Does anybody actually know this officer? No one answered. An elderly woman quietly whispered. I've never seen that patrol vehicle before. Another witness looked more closely at the SUV parked near the curb. No city markings. No department number. No official license plate. One observation became two. Two became five. Confidence was shifting. Not toward the man wearing the badge. Toward the man wearing none. The fake officer noticed the changing expressions. His voice grew sharper. What are all of you staring at? This man is under arrest. He looked around, almost demanding agreement from strangers. Instead, he found hesitation. Questions. Silence. Authority depended on belief. And belief was beginning to disappear. His jaw tightened. He grabbed Marcus by the upper arm once more. We're leaving. Marcus planted his feet. Not aggressively. Not forcefully. Simply enough to stop walking. I'll leave, Marcus said calmly. As soon as you identify yourself properly. The fake officer laughed, but it sounded hollow now. I don't answer to you. Marcus met his eyes. No. You answer to the law. For the first time, the fake officer glanced over both shoulders. He wasn't checking traffic. He was checking whether anyone else was watching. That single instinct revealed everything. People with legitimate authority rarely searched for escape routes. People pretending often did. Inside the surveillance vehicle, Detective Ethan Brooks watched the suspect's body language change. "There it is," he murmured. "He knows something's wrong." Laura Hayes picked up her radio one final time. "Outer units, hold your positions. Primary team, advance on my mark." Outside, the low rumble of multiple vehicles grew louder. Doors opened somewhere beyond the intersection. Measured footsteps echoed across the pavement. The fake officer still couldn't see who was coming. Marcus could. His expression never changed. But for the first time since the confrontation began, there was the faintest hint of confidence in his eyes. The waiting was over. Now the truth was walking toward them. The first unmarked SUV rolled into view without flashing lights. Then another, and another. They didn't rush the intersection. They surrounded it. Quietly, methodically. The fake officer frowned. His confidence, so effortless only moments before, began to fracture beneath a feeling he couldn't yet explain. Marcus Bennett watched the vehicle stop with the same calm expression he had worn since the confrontation began. He neither smiled nor celebrated. He simply waited. Because real justice rarely arrived in dramatic fashion. It arrived prepared. The crowd instinctively stepped back as several men and women exited the vehicles. Plainclothes, protective vests hidden beneath light jackets, communication earpieces. Their movements were synchronized, leaving little doubt that they had trained together for years. The fake officer's eyes narrowed. "Who are they?" he muttered. No one answered. Detective Laura Hayes walked forward first. Her badge remained inside her jacket. She wasn't interested in making an entrance. She was interested in making an arrest that would survive every courtroom challenge. She stopped several feet away. Her voice was calm. "Sir." The fake officer immediately straightened his posture. "About time." He pointed toward Marcus. "I've got this suspect detained." Hayes didn't even glance at Marcus. Instead, she studied the counterfeit uniform from head to toe. The misplaced insignia. The poorly fitted duty belt. The imitation badge. Every detail matched months of investigative reports. "Do you?" she asked quietly. The fake officer nodded. "Absolutely." Hayes looked toward Marcus for the first time. "You all right?" Marcus gave a small nod. "I'm fine." That brief exchange confused nearly everyone watching. The fake officer frowned. "You know this guy?" Marcus answered before Hayes could. "We've met professionally." The sentence sounded ordinary. Its meaning was anything but. A murmur swept through the crowd. "Professional?" Several phones zoomed closer. The live stream comments exploded with speculation. The fake officer laughed uneasily. "I don't know what game you're playing." Marcus calmly looked at the handcuffs still secured around his wrist. "I haven't been playing one." "You have. You just didn't realize who the other players were." Detective Ethan Brooks approached from Marcus's left. Without a word, he displayed his official credentials. The fake officer glanced at them for barely a second before looking away. Too quickly, as though refusing to accept what he had just seen. Brooks spoke evenly. "Take your hand off him." "What?" "You heard me." The fake officer hesitated, then forced another smile. "I think there's been some misunderstanding." "No," Brooks replied. "There hasn't." For the first time, genuine uncertainty appeared on the man's face. His breathing became uneven. His eyes darted toward the SUV he had arrived in, toward the crowd, toward every possible exit. But every direction now contained investigators. Every route had quietly disappeared. Marcus finally raised his free hand. With one smooth motion, he reached inside his jacket. Several spectators gasped. Instead of a weapon, he removed a leather credential wallet. He opened it slowly. Inside was an official law enforcement identification bearing his photograph, his name, and the unmistakable federal task force credentials authorizing his role in the ongoing operation. The silence that followed seemed to drain the sound from the entire street. The fake officer stared at the identification, then at Marcus. His lips parted, but no words came. Only then did he understand. The man he had tried to intimidate had never been an ordinary pedestrian. He had been the operation's central witness from the very beginning. And everything the impersonator had done had unfolded exactly as investigators had planned. For several endless seconds, no one moved. The fake officer's hand remained frozen around the loose end of the counterfeit handcuff. His eyes stayed fixed on the federal credentials Marcus Bennett had just revealed. The confidence that had carried him through the entire confrontation disappeared without a sound. Not shattered, simply gone. Around them, dozens of phones continued recording. The crowd sensed the shift immediately. People who had once stepped aside for the man wearing the badge now found themselves staring at him with growing suspicion. Marcus slowly closed the credential wallet and slipped it back inside his jacket. His movements were unhurried. He had nothing left to prove. The evidence had already spoken. Detective Laura Hayes took one measured step forward. Remove the handcuff. The impersonator swallowed. I didn't know he was, Hayes interrupted calmly. Remove it. There was no anger in her voice. Only certainty. The man hesitated, searching every face around him for support. He found none. The spectators who had once believed him now avoided his eyes. Authority built on deception could disappear in an instant. Slowly, with trembling fingers, he reached for the key attached to his belt. It slipped from his hand. Clink. The tiny sound echoed across the suddenly silent intersection. He bent to retrieve it, his movements awkward now, stripped of the confidence he had worn like another piece of the fake uniform. Marcus waited patiently. When the cuff finally clicked open, he rubbed his wrist once, leaving the faint red mark exactly where the metal had pressed against his skin. He said nothing. He didn't need to. Detective Ethan Brooks stepped beside the impersonator. You are no longer detaining anyone. His words were calm. They are detaining you. The sentence settled over the crowd like a wave. A young woman lowered her phone. So he wasn't a real cop? No. An older man answered quietly. He only looked like one. The distinction mattered. Real authority came from responsibility. Counterfeit authority relied on fear. Hayes nodded toward another investigator. A clear evidence bag was produced. The counterfeit badge, the imitation radio, the fake credentials. Each item was photographed before being collected. Procedure mattered, because truth deserved documentation. The impersonator finally found his voice. This is a mistake. Marcus looked at him for the first time since revealing his identification. It was a choice. You made it. The man opened his mouth again, but no explanation came. Every excuse collapsed beneath the weight of the recordings, the witnesses, and the weeks-long investigation that had quietly led to this intersection. Detective Hayes addressed the team. Scene secure. Brooks gave a single nod. Witness statements next. As investigators began speaking with the crowd, Marcus stepped away from the center of the scene. He watched ordinary traffic begin moving again. The city hadn't changed. Only the illusion had. Behind him, the counterfeit officer stood silently as his own wrists were brought together. This time, the handcuffs were genuine. This time, every procedure was followed. And for the first time that day, the man who had pretended to represent the law was forced to stand before the real thing, discovering that the strongest badge is never the one pinned to a uniform. It is the truth that no disguise can outrun. The counterfeit badge disappeared into the evidence bag with a quiet metallic click. It was such a small sound, yet it marked the end of an illusion that had fooled countless victims. Marcus Bennett watched the evidence technician seal the bag with the same composed expression he had worn throughout the operation. The anger many expected never appeared. Neither did triumph. Justice, he had learned long ago, was strongest when it didn't need applause. Around the intersection, investigators separated witnesses into small groups. Each person was asked the same simple questions. What did you see? What did you hear? When did you begin recording? Truth was being assembled one careful statement at a time. Nearby, Detective Laura Hayes reviewed footage. Streaming onto a tablet. Traffic cameras. Body cameras. Storefront security systems. Cell phone recordings from nearly every angle imaginable. One incident. Dozens of perspectives. Together, they formed a picture that no defense attorney could easily distort. Detective Ethan Brooks approached Marcus. You handled yourself exactly as planned. Marcus glanced at the fading red mark around his wrist. I wish no one ever had to. Brooks understood what he meant. Operations like this succeeded because previous victims had suffered without anyone believing them. Today had been different. Today, preparation had finally caught up with deception. Only a few yards away, the impersonator sat silently on the rear bumper of an unmarked vehicle while another investigator documented every item removed from his uniform. The fake shoulder patches. The imitation duty belt, the counterfeit identification cards. Each object represented another decision, another opportunity to stop, another opportunity ignored. The man stared at the pavement. He no longer looked like someone wearing authority. He looked like someone hiding behind its memory. One of the younger officers quietly asked Marcus, Did you know he would target you? Marcus nodded once. We knew he looked for people he believed wouldn't challenge him. The officer frowned. So he picked the wrong person. Marcus answered thoughtfully. He picked the right investigation. The distinction mattered. This had never been about revenge. It had been about ending a pattern before someone else became another forgotten victim. Across the sidewalk, the live stream that had begun as entertainment had transformed into something entirely different. Viewers who had rushed to judgment were now replaying the encounter frame by frame. Many noticed details they had overlooked before. The missing procedures, the counterfeit equipment, the calm confidence of the man they had mistakenly assumed was powerless. Perspective changed quickly when facts arrived. As investigators finished documenting the scene, normal traffic gradually resumed. Car horns returned. Pedestrians crossed the street. The saxophone player began performing once more, filling the downtown air with a slow, reflective melody. The city reclaimed its rhythm. Marcus took one final look at the intersection. Hours from now, there would be no visible sign that anything extraordinary had happened there. No plaque. No headline painted across the pavement. Only a collection of evidence, witness statements, and recorded truth waiting to speak inside a courtroom. Sometimes justice arrived with flashing lights. Sometimes it arrived through patience. And sometimes, the most powerful moment wasn't the arrest itself. It was the instant a lie lost the audience it depended on, leaving nothing behind except the truth standing quietly in the middle of the street. Several weeks later, the courtroom was almost full before the hearing even began. Reporters filled the back rows. Former victims sat quietly together. Investigators reviewed thick folders of evidence one final time. At the prosecution table, every photograph, every recording, and every witness statement had been organized with meticulous care. Nothing had been left to chance. Marcus Bennett entered without ceremony. He wore a dark suit instead of a uniform. There was no need for visible authority anymore. His credibility had already been earned. Across the room, Travis Cole looked different. The counterfeit confidence was gone. Without the imitation badge, the copied uniform, and the borrowed authority, he appeared smaller than anyone remembered. His shoulders remained lowered. His eyes rarely left the defense table. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Then silence settled across the courtroom. The prosecutor began simply. This case is not about one encounter. It is about a deliberate pattern of deception. Photographs appeared on the courtroom monitors. Counterfeit credentials. Recovered equipment. Images of the fake patrol vehicle. Each exhibit represented another piece of a carefully constructed lie. Witnesses testified one after another. An elderly veteran described being intimidated during a traffic stop. A college student recalled surrendering personal belongings after believing Travis was a legitimate officer. A delivery driver admitted he had never reported the incident because he assumed no one would believe him. Different stories. The same deception. When Marcus finally took the witness stand, the courtroom grew even quieter. He answered every question with calm precision. No exaggeration. No anger. Only facts. The prosecutor asked, at any point during the encounter, "Did you identify yourself immediately?" Marcus shook his head. No. Why not? Because our investigation needed evidence. And because previous victims deserved proof. The answer lingered throughout the courtroom. Several jurors wrote notes. Even Travis looked down. Detective Laura Hayes later explained how months of surveillance had connected multiple complaints that once seemed unrelated. Traffic footage, business security cameras, digital records, independent witness statements. One by one, every isolated incident had become part of the same unmistakable pattern. When the prosecution rested, the defense attempted to challenge the investigation. But every question returned to the same obstacle. The recordings, the timestamps, the physical evidence. The facts did not contradict one another. They reinforced one another. During a recess, Marcus stood beside a courtroom window overlooking the city. Detective Ethan Brooks joined him. "You know," Brooks said quietly, "people are going to remember this case." Marcus watched sunlight reflect across the buildings outside. "I hope they remember something else." "What?" "That authority isn't proven by a badge. It's proven by integrity." Brooks nodded. Neither man spoke again. Inside the courtroom, the proceedings continued. Outside, life moved forward as it always had. Cars crossed intersections. People hurried toward work. Children laughed somewhere beyond the courthouse steps. Most would never know how close a dangerous deception had come to continuing unchecked. But because one investigation refused to rely on appearances, the truth had finally reached the place where every lie must eventually stand. Not before a crowd, not before a camera, but before justice itself. And there, no counterfeit badge could ever outweigh the quiet, undeniable weight of the truth.